I'm gonna be making horse Christmas cookies today, and I'm gonna show you guys how to make some too. All right, you guys, so these are the stencils that I made from some of my art for making our cookies. So the way you're gonna be able to use these, or at least the way I'm using them, and feel free to use them in any way you would like. I have gotten a piece of tracing paper, and what I recommend you do is get some cardboard. So this is the cardboard that I use for mine. It's not too thick. I can still cut it out with a pair of scissors, and that's important because it's gonna be really difficult to cut it out if it's too thick, but you do want it to be firm enough that you can use this as your stencil for the cookies. I went around with a pen because a pen puts a lot more pressure than a pencil would, and I traced the whole outer edge of the horse onto the cardboard. And I recommend that this is your first time making cookies or tracing things like this, that you only do 2 of them because it might get overwhelming to try to do all of them. So if you're a beginner, I would go with this and this cookie. These were all on the same piece of cardboard, and they had a black line around them, which is what the tracing paper left. And then I cut them out with a pair of scissors. After I cut them all out, so this is all 6 of them, I then erase all of the black lines that are around the outer edge. And there's still a little bit of black on there, but it's not a whole lot. And that's really important because you're gonna be putting this on the food you're gonna be eating, and you don't want this paper on your food. All right, so to make our cookie dough, we are going to use 3 cups of flour, the zest from 2 lemons, 1 cup of sugar, some lemon essential oil. If you don't have this, you don't have to use this. You could just put in a little bit of lemon juice. Vanilla extract, a teaspoon, 1 egg, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and 1 cup of butter. And that is all of the ingredients that are gonna go into the cookies. So you're gonna start by putting the softened butter into your mixer. And if you don't have a mixer like this, you can do it with a hand mixer, or by hand, it will just take a bit longer. And then we're gonna stick our cup of sugar in with the butter. And then we're gonna beat this until it's really nice and fluffy, and that can be anywhere from like 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes. I'm now going to add the vanilla. So 1 teaspoon of vanilla. It's okay if it's a little more. And our lemon zest. Our 1 egg. Our lemon essential oil. And the lemon essential oil I like to put in one of the capfuls that's on this container, so I'm not exactly sure how many drops that is. And the reason why we're making lemon cookies instead of gingerbread cookies, because I love gingerbread cookies, is that the gingerbread cookies have to be refrigerated before you can roll them out and use them. And this recipe we can start making cookies with immediately. You're gonna turn that on and mix it again until it's well combined. Right here. Now that we have all of the wet ingredients mixed up, we're gonna mix our dry ingredients. So 3 cups of flour, the 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and the salt. But I'm not just gonna dump the baking powder into the flour because it has these little clumps in it, and then it doesn't get well mixed, so I'm gonna actually put it through a strainer. Mix it into the flour so that it's well combined. Just a little bit. And now I'm going to start adding it to the mixer. So I'm gonna turn the mixer on kind of a medium because I don't want this to go everywhere in the sky. I'm gonna slowly start adding it. Now at this point, I'm actually going to change the mixing head from the whisk to this one because I feel like this is too hard for the whisk. And we're going to just turn it out onto the counter. And it's gonna be kind of sticky and hard, maybe even a little crumbly. And if it's too dry, you can always add just a tiny bit of water. And I'm just gonna mix it by hand, just a little bit, so that it all combines really well. Okay, so at this point, you're gonna wanna turn on your oven and preheat it to 350 Fahrenheit. And this is our dough, and it's just been sitting here for a few minutes on the counter. So I have a rolling pin and this plastic mat because it helps me get the cookies off the counter sometimes when they're harder to get off, but you can do it directly on the counter. You don't need a plastic mat. This dough is really lemony, so if you don't like citrus flavors, you can make this exact same recipe without the lemon oil and without the lemon zest. So this is how you are going to use your stencils to cut out your cookies. The little ball of dough, roll it out starting from the middle. And that's why I like using this plastic thing, because I can just rotate this instead of having to turn the rolling pin the other direction. Not too thin. If it's too thin, this isn't gonna work. And you don't want it way too thick that it isn't gonna cook. So about a 1/4 inch. You're going to stick your horse stencils onto the dough and just lightly push down so that it stays in place and doesn't move around on you. You can either use a knife like this, which is just a little knife. Basically, any knife will do that has a little point. Or even this butter knife will work. If you're using the butter knife, you're gonna get less details, but that's okay. If you use this one, you might get a few more. Don't worry, don't get frustrated if you're trying to get every single line or get the ears just the way they are. Like with this guy here, 2 ears, and really, they can just be 1 ear, and it will make it a lot less complicated for you. So, I'm going to start cutting them out. Push your knife in up against the cardboard and just follow your stencil. It's really hard to hold up there, so I'm going to do it down here. We're going to cut out this guy. And like I said again, if you're not getting all of the little details or everything that's there, it's okay. They'll still look really good. I'm going to use this butter knife, but you can also use a spatula. And I'm just going to go underneath and get rid of the stuff that is around him first. That piece there, remove it so that I can get an easy grip. Now you can take the cardboard off at this point, or you can just leave it on. And I'm gonna slide my knife underneath the cookie and just kind of gently release it from I'm going to go around my stencil. And this is why it's important that you don't just use paper. It needs to be kind of like a cardboard, because you won't be able to push in on the stencil then. So again, I'm going to remove the excess dough from around my horse, because that will make it easier to pick him up. So once you get up underneath one side, put your fingers and just lift it up. And now I've got my cookie here. You can see, and the cardboard's on one side, and I'm gonna take the cookie and place it onto the tray and then gently pull off my stencil. And what's gonna end up happening is you're going to see that he's a little rough around the edges, and that's from the knife leaving little rough edges around the cookie. And you can see that these ones don't really have those rough edges, and that's because I just gently took my finger and pushed on the edge. And what you can do too is you don't have to use your finger. You could use the knife and just pat it in a bit. And that's just what's gonna happen when you're using stencils instead of cookie cutters. Guys, so I went ahead and baked my cookies for 8 minutes at 350, and I will show you what they look like right now. But I wanted to mention real fast a few things that I forgot to mention, and that is you really should put your cookies on parchment paper when cooking them so that they're easy to get off of the tray. I had one piece of parchment paper left here, so I only used the parchment paper on one tray. But I highly recommend sticking on all of the trays if you can. Another really quick tip is the horses can be really hard to get up and move sometimes onto your trays. So you can go ahead and roll out your first dough on here and cut out 2 horses and just pick up the excess dough and then leave them on the paper, pick it up and put it on your tray. So that would make it a lot easier to at least get 2 horses that are really well cut out, because it is difficult to pick them up and move them. And if you're having a lot of trouble, what you can do is cut them out on a plastic mat, leave them on the plastic mat, stick the plastic mat in the freezer and let them get really hard, and then you'll be able to scrape them off much easier and stick them on your baking trays. Once you get your cookies out of the oven, make sure that you leave them for at least 2 to 3 hours to cool off entirely and then become a little bit hard. I actually left these overnight, so I am going to be decorating them today, and I made them last night. And a few of them burnt a little bit on the edges, you can see that. This one got a little bit puffy, but it's okay. When we go to decorate them, they will turn out really nicely. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm going to be using for putting our frosting in before we make the frosting. I'm going to be using 3 of these bags that are kind of like washable fabric with these tips. So this goes in here, and then you can stick the metal tip or nozzle that you like on, fill it up with your frosting. So I'm going to be using 3 of these bags and 2 cheaper, just normal plastic ones. And the reason why I'm using these is because I don't actually have any more of these. And if you don't have any bags at all, piping bags, you can use like plastic Ziploc bags and cut one of the corners. But it is going to be a lot easier to get, especially like little fine details and stuff, if you have the piping bags. These are all my cookies that came out. Out of all of my patterns that I made and stencils, he was very easy to do. I do not recommend doing him. He was really hard to cut out. I only got 2, I think, 2 of them done. I thought he'd be easier, but he was definitely very hard to cut out. He was difficult, but definitely well worth it, because I really love the way these cookies came out of him. And the jumping horse is also really hard to cut out. You can see I had a problem here. He's missing a foot, and this one's okay. I did get 1 or 2 really nice ones though. Put this one here so you can see how nicely that came out. Ingredients we're going to be using for our frosting: powdered sugar, vanilla extract, a lime or a lemon, or both if you'd like, some butter, and I'm going to put a little bit of this lemon oil in mine, but you don't really need that. So the thing with the frosting is I've never really measured it out. I don't really have a recipe for it. I just make it. So I'm going to try to tell you guys more or less what I'm sticking in, but it's really more about what the consistency is when it's done. So I'm going to add a chunk of butter to the beater, and about a half cupful of vanilla extract, maybe a little bit more. The juice from my lime. I forgot one of the ingredients is going to be milk. And then I'm going to pour some powdered sugar in. I'm going to turn that on. Okay, so I turned that on and let it mix just a little bit so I could see the consistency. And I'm going to add a cupful of milk. You don't need a whole lot of liquid in this. So I whipped that up quite a bit. So it's soft. but it's still kind of, it holds up, it's not like liquidy. This is gonna be my thicker one, and I'm gonna make a thinner one. If when you go to pipe it, you realize, oh, it's running everywhere, it's not holding its shape, or whatever, you can always just take it out of your piping bag. If it's too thick, you can always add more powdered sugar, and if it's too thin, you can always add a little bit of water or a little bit of milk. You don't have to add lime juice at all. If you want, you can make this exact same recipe with just milk and the vanilla extract. So I have made my frostings, and like I said, the same recipe, just more liquid in one than the other one. So this is the thicker one. Oh, we'll focus on that. Here we go. This is a thicker one, and you can see how it won't even really move around that much in the bowl. So this is the consistency you want for that. This is the thinner one, and you can see how it's kind of drippy. All right, I'm gonna start with the thinner one. I am going to divide this up into 3 separate bowls. Making black frosting is really hard. I have some black food coloring here, but it's never really black. It's more like a dark kind of brown color. So you have to add quite a bit even to get it to be that color and not be gray. Add quite a bit of the black. I'm gonna start, always remember to start when adding your food colors, put less than you think you need, because you can always add more, but you can never take it out. So start slowly and build up to the color you want. So you can see that's kind of a nasty brown color right now. So we're gonna add a few more drops of black. Okay, I think that's about as black as we're gonna get that. Now I'm going to make brown, and I'm going to make brown with adding a drop of the black food coloring. Maybe 2 drops of the black, because I know it already makes kind of like a yucky brown color. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of red to that. So it's kind of a purple color right now. I have to work with that. You want the horses to be brown, so I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow. All right, so I now have a nice brown color. So I'm going to be using the brown, black, and white of the liquidy frosting, and of the thicker frosting, I'm going to make these same colors, and I'm also going to make red and green to do the decorations on the horses to make them Christmassy. I went ahead and did one of these, kind of like my painting, Secret Garden. So this is the horse from Secret Garden. And I'm going to be putting some Christmas decorations on him after this coat sets up. So here is my cookie, and I have 3 frosting colors right now. I have brown, white, and black, and this is the harder frosting, so the thicker frosting. And I have the same thing in the runnier frosting. So I'm going to start by making an outline of with the thick frosting, and this is what you're going to do for any design. You're going to outline what you want with black or whatever color it is in the thick frosting, and then you're going to go ahead and fill it in with the thin frosting. So this is the thicker frosting, and whenever you're putting frosting on the cookie, you want to let it drop on, touch the cookie with the frosting, lift it up, and let it drop onto the cookie. So let's see if I can do this here. You want to pick it up and let it drop into place. Like that. What you don't want to do is hold the thing down and try to go along the line of the cookie, putting the frosting down, because it's really hard to get a straight line that way. And then the frosting has a tendency to pool and get gaps in it when you do that. The other important thing is the frosting, especially the thicker one, will dry out. If it's exposed to the air for long enough, it will get kind of hard. So you want to get a wet paper towel and stick it on all of your tips so that it keeps the tips from drying out, because if they dry out, they'll get clogged up and you won't be able to use it. I have my printout here, and I'm going to actually put it on my cookie. And you can see the cookie is bigger than the printout, but I'm going to get it more or less in the right spot there. And I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to just poke holes, so all along the black lines that are there where the eye is. And I'm also going to poke a few holes on this one. And I don't know if you can see, I can see where the eye goes because it's kind of poked out. You don't want to do that too hard. And I can see where the jaw line goes because it's kind of poked out. Now, I'm not going to do it with everything on this horse because I have a really good idea where all of this goes. But I do recommend that you at least do it for the eyes on each horse so that the eye ends up in the right spot, because that's really important. If the eye's in the wrong spot, then the horses tend to look really funny. I'm going to get my thick frosting and I'm going to start by following the design that was on my original art. I'm going to do the eye and this funny little patch he has over here. Basic shape of the black, and it looks kind of funny right now, and that's pretty normal because it's a half decorated cookie, so don't get discouraged if you're like, oh, this is really ugly. You can just keep doing it and it will look good. So now I'm going to make sure I cover my frosting tip again so it doesn't dry out. I'm going to get my white frosting, the hard frosting, and I'm going to start going around and doing all of the white. Definitely rotate your cookie while you're doing this. Have a clean surface. All right, and what I usually do with a small knife or the needle is just push down any frosting that got stuck up or is in a slightly funny position. All right, now this horse has braids on his mane, and I don't know if you can see those there. I'll show them to you here in just a second. So I'm actually going to put a little dot where each braid was supposed to go. Right, and I'm going to put a dot of white inside the eye with the thick frosting. And again, I can organize those dots with the needle, or you could get a toothpick. Right, and then I'm going to stick his nostril in as well with the white thick frosting. So now I have the basic outline, and I'm going to go in with my thin frosting, and I'm going to start with the white one and start filling in the areas that need to be white. And when you're doing this, you want to remember that this frosting is going to spread out a little bit because it's really thin. So you don't need to put way too much. You can put just a little bit, and the holes that you leave will start to fill in all by themselves. And if not, you can come by and shake the cookie a little bit, and that will make the holes fill in. Or use a toothpick to organize it just a little bit. You don't want to go overboard with this runny frosting. All right, so now I got a little bit of black on there that I didn't want. I'm just gonna pick that off, and I'm going to gently, because this is still setting up, and really you should wait in between putting on this frosting, so the hard frosting, and putting the runny layer on. You should wait at least 10 minutes. So what I would recommend doing is putting the hard frosting on all of your cookies and then going back with the runny frosting and filling in everything you want runny. I'm doing this way just to show you guys really fast how it's done, but you really do want to wait in between so that this hard frosting has time to get really hard and stick to the cookie, so you can't mess it up when you're filling it in with this. So now I'm going to fill in this black area. Now what's cool about this is I can still see the places where I stuck the harder frosting. So if you want to stick muscles or details in your horse's face, you can do that by putting it with the thicker frosting and then still filling it up with the other one. I'm going to shake this cookie a bit, so I'm going to grab it from a good spot where I know it's not too fragile, and I'm just going to shake it back and forth on the counter, and that's so that the thin frosting smooths out really evenly. All right, now I'm going to finish doing the white. I'm going to leave the inside of his nostril the cookie color because otherwise it would blend in with everything else. And I didn't make any pink frosting. Now I'm going to take my thick black again, and I'm going to stick the pupil in the middle of the eye. And maybe I'll pick this up, if I can do this while I've got it up, and show you guys up close. Okay, so now I have the pupil in his eye, and I'm just going to organize that a little bit. All right, now again, you really should wait for this layer to dry before doing more. And I am gonna wait for this layer to dry before putting on the Christmas decorations, but I am going to go ahead and show you what I would do after this layer would dry, and that is I would add again on top the muscles in the face. So I'd go over him again with this and retouch him up and probably redo his little braids some more. And you can see I got a little bit of the black frosting here, and it's a little messy, but that's okay because I am going to decorate him with Christmas decorations, and I can cover the sections that didn't turn out that great. So here are the finished horse cookies. And I really like the way they turned out. I think they turned out really nice. I will give you a few tips and tricks on how I did the frosting, the bows and stuff like that. I really, really like the way this guy's jacket came out. Super cute. And this guy put some little candies on, which I'll show you guys right now. My candy cane horse. And I think this one's actually my favorite one out of all the ones I did. I really like him. So I'm going to show you real quick a few of the things that I did to make these cookies. So this guy right here, the way I did his braid, I'm going to show you that first. It's really simple. I just started on one side of it and went back and forth in kind of a wobbly pattern like this with the red, and just moving the bag back and forth like that. This is how I did the red bows. So this is a plastic bag that's got a pretty big opening. I started from the middle of the bow, bring it out, and then kind of try to fold it on top of itself like that. So there's one side of the bow. Turn this the other way, bring it this way, and then fold it back that way. And then I turned this the way that the flat frosting will be coming out first. I went over the top of this, so that's like the center of the bow, and then made the little ribbons coming out, just like this. The curly hair on this guy is really easy to do, so I'll show you how to do that. So start at the top and just make circles, and if your frosting isn't staying, if you do this and then it kind of puddles in a few minutes later, it's kind of losing the definition, that means you don't have enough icing sugar in your frosting. So you need to just make it a little thicker. The leaves, and you can see I used this tip on the frosting bag, and we're gonna hold it like this, and you push down and kind of wiggle it, and the more you wiggle it back and forth, you'll get a little, that one wasn't so good, let's do that one like that, you'll get leaves like this, and that is how I did the leaves. This guy here has those leaves on him, and this one has those leaves. I also used candies that I got from a gingerbread house kit. So these are the little lights that I use. You can do like on this one, I put gummies on him as well. Don't be discouraged if they don't all come out looking fabulous. These are the ones I did that are not so great. I really like the idea behind this one of covering the whole thing with little white designs, but then his foot broke off and he's not that great. And then these are the ones that came out of the oven that baked wrong and then they broke. So if you have any broken cookies, you can use those for the experiments like I did with these ones.